man, Wade Wilson, is accused of brutally murdering two Cape Coral women, Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. He's been in jail since 2019 awaiting trial, and recently he sent us dozens of letters with some wild accusations.
Some crimes do not begin with violence. They begin with a phone call, a call so unexpected that it immediately feels wrong, a voice on the other end, familiar yet shaken, and a sentence that cannot be unheard once spoken. I did something I can't take back. At first it sounds vague, almost incomplete, but then comes the pause, and then the words that change everything.
Tonight, for the first time ever, and from jail, he's talking, and it's with NBC2 anchor Kyla Gaylor.
People. That was all it took for reality to collapse. Within hours, law enforcement was searching for the same person who had just asked his own father for help. A man moving freely, almost casually, despite the fact that two lives had already been erased. What followed was not a single act of violence, but a rapid descent. A chain of decisions made without hesitation. A pattern that had been forming for years, hidden behind charm, excuses, and second chances. This is a story about escalation, about warnings that were ignored, about how repeated abuse, unchecked rage, and entitlement can evolve into something far more dangerous. It is also a story about randomness. Two women, strangers to each other, different lives, different paths, connected only by the moment they crossed the wrong person's path. One night began with music, drinks, and casual conversation. Another began with a short walk to work. Neither was meant to be a goodbye. What makes this case especially disturbing is not just the brutality but the mindset behind it. The lack of remorse. The pride hidden inside confession. The calmness with which horror was described. As investigators pieced together the timeline, a clearer picture emerged. This was not an accident, not intoxication alone, not impulse in isolation. This was the result of years of behavior escalating without consequence. And when the truth finally surfaced, it revealed something far more unsettling than violence itself. A person who believed he could do anything and get away with it. It is the story of every moment that came before them. On the evening of October 7, 2019, in the state of Florida, a man received a phone call no parent is ever prepared for. It came without warning, no context, no explanation. The voice on the other end belonged to his son. What made the call unsettling was not just the timing, it was the tone. Calm, almost detached, yet weighed down by something irreversible. After a brief pause, the words finally came. I did something I can't take back. At first, it sounded like trouble, maybe drugs, maybe another fight, maybe another situation where his son had crossed a line and needed help getting out of it, something that had happened before, but this time was different. As the conversation continued, the truth began to surface in fragments. Not a full confession, not a clear story, just pieces, enough to trigger dread. There were two people, his son said. And I did something I can't undo. That was the moment the father understood this was not about trouble anymore. This was about something far worse. Almost simultaneously, another call came in. This one from a police officer. They were searching for the same man who had just asked his father for help. The overlap was impossible to ignore. Something catastrophic had already happened. To understand how this night unfolded the way it did, investigators would later have to go back decades. Very beginning, he was born in May 1994. His biological parents were teenagers at the time, far too young emotionally and financially to raise a child. Faced with a responsibility they were not ready for, they made the decision to place him for adoption. The family that adopted him appeared, on the surface, to offer everything a child could need: stability, resource, a comfortable home in a decent neighborhood, two older siblings, a structured environment built on discipline and care. From the outside, it looked like a second chance at a normal life, and for a while it worked. He attended school, he played, he had friends. There was no immediate sign of what would come later, but people who knew him during those years would later describe something subtle, something off. A tendency toward trouble, a lack of respect for authority, a desire to provoke rather than belong. By the time he reached high school, those traits had become impossible to ignore. This was a period when crime in his area was already on the rise. Drugs were accessible. Bad influences were everywhere, and instead of resisting that environment, he gravitated toward it. Classes were optional. Drugs came first. Authority meant nothing. He broke into cars, trespassed on private property, caused problems simply because he could. What began as petty behavior escalated quickly. Eventually, he was expelled after starting a fire in a school bathroom while smoking. Despite all of this, he was given chances. More chances than most people ever receive. He had parents who continued to support him. A home he could return to. People who believed he could still change. But instead of seeing that support as a lifeline, he treated it as permission. By the age of 18, his behavior crossed into officially recorded crime: burglaries, firearm-related offenses, arrests that marked the beginning of a pattern that would only grow darker. Around this time, He reconnected with his biological father. But this was not a reunion rooted in family or healing, it was transactional. The calls came when he needed something: money, help, a way out of trouble. There was no emotional bond, only convenience. As years passed, his criminal life intensified, jail time became routine. Illegal weapons, theft and violence were no longer shocking, they were expected. But one pattern stood out more than any other. His relationship with women. This was not just disrespect or manipulation, it was aggression, control. A deeply dangerous hostility that revealed itself through repeated incidents of abuse.
Multiple women would later come forward with similar stories. Charm at first, followed by intimidation, violence, and terror. He knew how to present himself. He was tall, physically imposing, confident. He could appear polite, funny, even caring.
In 2015, he was accused of kidnapping and violently assaulting a woman. The case eventually collapsed due to lack of evidence. No conviction followed. No lasting consequence. What remained was confidence. Confidence that he could hurt women and escape accountability. From that point forward, his behavior escalated rapidly. Drug use increased. Violence became more frequent. Control turned into obsession. One woman in particular would survive an attack so severe it nearly cost her life. Yet even that did not stop him. Police reports existed. Complaints were filed. Charges were brought, and then dropped. The message was reinforced: he could keep going. By the time October 2019 arrived, the trajectory was clear. This was no longer a troubled individual making mistakes. This was someone moving steadily toward irreversible violence. And on the night of October 6, that escalation reached its breaking point. What began as a night out, music, alcohol, strangers meeting casually, would end in unimaginable brutality. And it would not stop with one victim. Within hours, 2 women would be dead, one inside her own home, another on the side of a road, and the man responsible would spend the night running, confessing not to the police, but to the one person he believed might still help him escape: his father. But this time, the cycle would finally end, because the words spoken on that phone call were no longer just a confession. They were the beginning of the end. The night began the way countless others do: loud music, flashing lights, strangers brushing past each other without a second thought. A crowded bar in Florida, packed with people trying to forget their week, their worries, their limits. Among them was a woman in her mid-30s, had come out with her closest friend, someone she had known since childhood. They had grown up together, moved states together, worked similar jobs. That night was meant to be simple drinks, music, and then home. At another part of the same bar stood a man who was already living a double life. Earlier that evening, he had been there with his girlfriend. Their relationship was volatile, marked by jealousy, control, and fear. But from the outside it looked ordinary enough. When he disappeared to meet strangers and use drugs, she refused to follow. He left anyway, taking her car and abandoning her without explanation. That was the moment she decided she was done. She didn't know it yet, but walking away from him that night may have saved her life.
Wilson went on a drug-fueled killing spree, murdering 2 women in 48 hours. Christine Melton on the left and Diane Ruiz closest to me. Tonight, Wilson, along with his cellmate Joseph Katz, are in even more trouble. Reports say they tried to smash through a window and break out of jail.
He introduced himself with a fake name. He smiled easily. He joked. He listened. To the 2 friends, he seemed harmless, charismatic, even charming. Drugs followed. The group grew comfortable, then careless. This was not an accident. This was a skill. By the time the bar closed, the 4 of them decided to leave together. They went to a house belonging to another acquaintance. It was late, early morning really. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. One friend stayed outside with another man, smoking and drinking. Upstairs, the woman and the man were alone in a bedroom. They had known each other for only hours. Under normal circumstances, this would have ended as an awkward mistake, a forgettable hookup. But nothing about this night was normal. They had sex. Afterwards, the woman fell asleep, exhausted, intoxicated, vulnerable. Her friend left around dawn to return home and take care of her child, believing she was leaving her best friend safe. She was wrong. The man stayed awake. He watched, he waited. Later, investigators would point to this moment as proof of intent, not impulse, not confusion, patience. When the woman was fully asleep, he climbed on top of her and wrapped his hands around her neck. She woke in panic, gasping for air, trying to fight back. Her fingernails broke as she clawed at him, at the bed, at anything. But she was overpowered. Minutes later, she was dead. What happened next was almost as disturbing as the murder itself. He stayed. He wrapped her body in a blanket. He tried to move her, to place her in a car, but rigor mortis had already begun. Her body felt heavy, unmanageable, frustrated. He abandoned the idea and left her where she was, on the floor of her own home. Then he did something that revealed just how detached he was from reality. He used her phone. He called his girlfriend, the same woman he had abandoned earlier that night. He wanted to see her. He wanted his car back. He wanted control restored. She agreed to meet him, not out of love, but practicality. Her car was still missing. She wanted it back. She believed this would be the final confrontation. She insisted on meeting in public at her workplace. She brought her friend with her. That decision likely saved her life. When the man arrived, he wasn't driving her car. He was driving another woman's car, the same woman he had just killed. He was shirtless, barefoot, acting erratic. He asked where her car was. He ignored the question and demanded she get inside his vehicle. She refused. His mood changed instantly. He grabbed her, trying to force her into the car. She fought back. Her friend called 911 repeatedly. Bystanders watched, frozen in fear. In broad daylight, he beat her, dragged her, tore at her clothes. He threatened to kill her friend if she interfered. Only the sound of approaching police sirens stopped him. He fled. Now law enforcement was involved, but still, they didn't yet understand the full scope of what had happened. At that moment, they were responding to a domestic violence incident. Nothing more. The man drove away in the stolen car, already looking for his next escape. And that was when he saw her. A woman in her 40s, walking alone along the road. She worked nearby and was heading to her job. She was independent, responsible, reliable. A single mother doing exactly what she had done countless times before, pulled over and asked for directions. She gave them. He pretended not to understand. Asked her to show him instead. Against her better judgment, but guided by kindness, she got into the car. Within minutes, she knew something was wrong. His appearance, his injuries, his behavior. Panic set in. She asked him to stop the car. He didn't. Instead, he reached over and began choking her. Lost consciousness. He pushed her out of the car while it was still moving. She hit the ground, injured but alive, trying desperately to crawl away. He got back into the car and ran her over. Again, and again, and again. Later he would describe this with horrifying language, without emotion, without remorse. He dumped her body in an empty lot, took her phone, and drove off. By now, women were dead, one inside her home, one on the roadside. He wasn't hiding well. He went to a casual acquaintance's workplace, pacing, panicking, covered in blood. He confessed, casually, people, more than one. The acquaintance believed him. And while pretending to help, he called 911. But once again the man sensed danger and fled before police arrived, leaving behind something critical. The car. Inside it was blood, and a phone. That phone connected the murders. From that moment on, law enforcement understood what they were dealing with. Not a domestic abuser, not a drifter, but an active killer. And the hunt began. By the time law enforcement understood the full scope of what had happened, the case had transformed from a domestic violence call into something far more urgent. This was now a manhunt. 2 women were dead under radically different circumstances, yet unmistakably connected. A stolen vehicle, blood evidence. A phone belonging to the second victim found inside the car. The timeline was tight, the suspect mobile, and the risk immediate. Police issued alerts and began coordinating across jurisdictions. Patrol units canvassed roads, parking lots, vacant properties, anywhere someone on the run might try to disappear. But the man they were looking for wasn't thinking like someone who wanted to vanish. He was thinking like someone who still believed he could control the outcome. After abandoning the car, broke into a random house in a quiet neighborhood. The owners were away. The place was empty, perfect. Inside, he did something that stunned investigators once it was discovered. He showered, changed into the homeowner's clothes. He made food, he drank alcohol. He behaved as if the world outside was not closing in on him. This casual normalcy, coming just hours after 2 brutal killings, would later be cited as one of the clearest indicators of his psychological state. There was no panic proportional to what he had done. No visible urgency to flee the state immediately. Instead, control. Familiarity with chaos. While police searched, he picked up a phone, not to call a lawyer, not to call emergency services. He called his father. This was not the first time he had done so in a crisis. Whenever his life unraveled, drugs, arrests, violence, he reached for the same lifeline. But this call was different in tone, content, and consequence. Began the conversation the same way he always did, vague, alarming, incomplete. I did something I can't take back. At first, his father assumed the worst, but within familiar limits. Another assault, another arrest. Another mess that would need cleaning up. Then the details came, not all at once. Not clearly, but unmistakably. He described meeting a woman the night before. Attacking her. Killing her. He spoke about trying to move her body. About how it felt heavy. About how he left it behind. Then he talked about another woman. A stranger, lone. Pulled into his car under false pretenses. He described choking her. Running her over repeatedly. Using words so graphic and detached that even his father struggled to comprehend what he was hearing. There was no remorse in his voice. No hesitation. No shame. If anything, there was excitement. Sounded less like a confession and more like a performance, as if he wanted his father to feel what he had felt. To understand. To react. The father stayed calm. That calmness would save lives. Without alerting his son, He put the phone on speaker so his wife could hear every word. Together, they realized the only option left to them. Helping him escape would not protect him. It would only ensure more people were hurt. They asked for his location. He gave it. While keeping him talking, the father relayed the address to authorities. Within minutes, federal marshals and local law enforcement surrounded the house where he was hiding. Inside, the man sensed the shift. He knew what was coming. He asked for one last call with his father. This time, the conversation was different. The bravado was gone. The excitement drained. What remained was resignation. His father told him plainly that surrendering was the only choice left, that this was over. When the call ended, the man stepped outside. He did not fight. He did not run. He surrendered. The arrest was quiet, almost anticlimactic. But what followed was not. Investigators moved quickly. They recovered the first victim's body from her home. They located the second victim days later in the empty lot where she had been dumped. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Blunt force trauma, crushing injuries, signs of repeated assault. Both deaths were ruled homicides without hesitation. During interrogation, the man's behavior shifted again. This time, he denied everything, contradicted his own recorded phone calls. He claimed he was being framed. He offered conspiracy theories involving criminal organizations. None of it matched the evidence. The story changed, but the facts did not. Surveillance footage placed him with the victims. Witnesses described his behavior. Physical evidence linked him to the scenes. The stolen car, the phones, the blood, the timelines, even his own words, recorded during phone calls and earlier statements, sealed his fate. As the case moved toward trial, more disturbing details emerged. Attempts to escape custody, smuggling contraband while incarcerated, continued manipulation of anyone who would listen.
The first girl, if you could tell the jurors, what did he tell you?
He just said he met a girl at a bar. They went back to her house, hung out for a little bit, and then she fell asleep.
What did he say happened after she fell asleep?
He said he got on top of her and choked her.
What name did he call her? Did he refer to her in a derogatory term?
He said, I choked that.
And then there was something else, something unexpected. Support. Despite the brutality of the crimes, the man began receiving letters, messages, and money from strangers, mostly women. Some expressed sympathy, others admiration. A few insisted he was misunderstood. For the families of the victims, this was incomprehensible. They attended hearings. They gave statements. They listened as the man who had destroyed their lives showed little to no emotion. They described the children left behind, the routines that would never resume, the questions that would never have answers. When the trial finally concluded, the verdict was decisive. Guilty. The sentence reflected the severity of the crimes. The court made it clear that this was not a case of impulse alone, but of escalating violence unchecked for years. The man was removed from society permanently. But even as the courtroom emptied, the truth lingered. This was not a monster who appeared overnight. This was a pattern that had been allowed to grow. A series of warnings dismissed. A trail of victims who survived, until two didn't. The manhunt ended with an arrest. The case ended with a sentence. But the story leaves behind a question that cannot be ignored. How many chances does someone get before violence becomes inevitable? When the courtroom doors finally closed, there was no sense of resolution, only a heavy, irreversible quiet. Justice had followed its course, but justice does not restore what has been taken. It does not return lives, repair families, or erase the moments that now live permanently in memory. Two women were gone. Not because of fate, not because of chance, but because violence was allowed to escalate unchecked. As prosecutors laid out the final arguments, a pattern became impossible to deny. This was not a sudden transformation. This was not a single bad night fueled by substances or emotion. This was the end result of years of behavior that had repeatedly crossed lines, each time without consequence strong enough to stop it. Warnings existed, police reports, victim statements, hospital visits, dropped charges, second chances. Every incident added another layer, another signal that something was deeply wrong. And each time the system reset, the message became clearer to the person committing the violence: you can keep going. What makes this case especially disturbing is not just the brutality of the murders, but how ordinary the circumstances appeared before they happened. A night out, a walk to work, small decisions made in good faith, trusting a stranger, helping someone, believing danger would look obvious when it arrived. It didn't. Danger arrived calmly, smiling, asking for directions. The first victim never woke up from sleep. The second realized the threat only when it was too late to escape. Both deaths were swift in execution and devastating in consequence. Their lives were not taken during a robbery, a feud, or a crime of necessity. They were taken because someone wanted control and felt entitled to exercise it. That entitlement had been reinforced for years. Experts who reviewed the case later pointed to a familiar trajectory: repeated abuse followed by reconciliation, denial, or dismissal. Each escape from accountability strengthened the belief that violence carried no permanent cost, until it did. During sentencing, the family spoke. They did not speak in anger alone. They spoke in loss, in disbelief, in grief that no language can properly contain. They spoke of children who would grow up without mothers, of friends who would never again hear familiar laughter, of routines shattered forever. Those statements mattered, not because they influenced the outcome. The verdict was inevitable, but because they restored something the crimes tried to erase: humanity. In contrast, the man at the center of the case showed little reaction. At times he appeared bored, at others, irritated. His attempts to reframe the narrative continued even after conviction. Claims of innocence, conspiracy, manipulation. The evidence was overwhelming. The timeline was clear. The actions were deliberate. The court acknowledged what the families already knew. These were not accidents, they were choices. The sentence ensured one thing above all else: he would never again be in a position to harm someone outside prison walls. That assurance mattered. It meant safety for strangers who would never know how close they came to becoming victims themselves. Still, the aftermath raised uncomfortable questions. Why are early warnings so often ignored? Why do victims carry the burden of proof, fear, and survival? Why does accountability arrive only after irreversible damage is done? This case forces a reckoning with those questions, exposes how violence is rarely isolated. It grows, it repeats, it tests boundaries until something or someone breaks. And when intervention fails early, consequences multiply later. There is also a darker reality to confront society's fascination with violent offenders. The attention, the letters, the supporters who confuse notoriety with worth. This phenomenon adds another layer of harm, one that re-traumatizes families and distorts responsibility. Violence does not deserve an audience. It deserves consequence. As time passes, this case will become another file number, another reference point in legal discussions. But for those left behind, time will move differently. It will be measured in milestones missed, in empty chairs, in moments where grief resurfaces without warning. And yet, even within that loss, there is something this story leaves behind: a warning. That charm is not character. That apologies are not accountability. That repeated harm is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern. Most importantly, this case reminds us that prevention matters. Listening matters. Believing survivors matters. Because intervention after violence is justice, but intervention before violence is protection. 2 lives were lost before the system finally acted decisively. Their stories deserve to be remembered not for how they ended, but for what they teach. That ignoring the signs does not make danger disappear. It only delays the moment when consequences become irreversible. And that cost, once paid, can never be refunded.